The first time my wife asked me to sign the prenup, she smiled. Not warmly. Not nervously. It was the kind of smile people use when they think they already won something. The restaurant around us was quiet. Soft piano music. Expensive wine glasses. Candlelight reflecting off polished silver. She slid the folder across the table carefully. Almost gently. Like she was handing me paperwork at a bank instead of quietly testing how much humiliation I was willing to accept before marriage. I just want us both protected, she said. Protected. That word stayed with me. At the time, I laughed softly and opened the folder. But deep down, something already felt wrong. Not because of the prenup itself. I believed in prenups. I had no issue with protecting assets. The problem was the way she watched me while I read it. Like she expected disappointment. Like she expected pain. And maybe even enjoyed it a little. Looking back, that should have warned me. Her name was Vanessa Hale. Beautiful. Elegant. Intelligent. The kind of woman who could walk into a room and make people immediately straighten their posture without understanding why. When we met, she was still building her interior design company. I helped finance her first office. Quietly. No contracts. No leverage. No pressure. I loved her. Or at least, I loved the version of her I thought was real. At the restaurant I kept reading. Most of it looked standard. Asset separation. Liability protection. Business ownership clauses. Then I reached page 17. And my fingers stopped moving. There was a lifestyle clause. If the marriage ended because of financial underperformance on my part, I would leave with nothing beyond personal savings. No shared properties. No equity adjustments. Nothing. I looked up slowly. Vanessa took a sip of wine. Calm. Too calm. You included financial performance metrics? I asked. She shrugged lightly. You're ambitious. I'm ambitious. I think accountability matters. Accountability. Another word that sounded harmless until you realized how cold it really was. I remember staring at her hands. Perfect nails. Wedding ring samples on her phone beside the wine glass. And suddenly, I felt like I was interviewing for my own marriage. You think I'm going to fail? I asked carefully. She smiled again. That depends. Pause. On whether you stay who you are now. That sentence bothered me for weeks. At the time, I convinced myself she didn't mean it the way it sounded. Now I know better. The waiter came by. Vanessa immediately switched personalities. Warm smile. Gentle voice. Perfect fiancé. The transformation was instant. That was the first moment I truly noticed how skilled she was at controlling perception. Especially mine. I closed the folder. Then I did something she didn't expect. I smiled. All right, I said calmly. Have your lawyer send it over officially. She blinked once. Almost surprised I didn't argue. That tiny reaction told me more than the contract itself. She wanted resistance. Because resistance would have proven emotional control. Instead, I gave her nothing. But that wasn't the worst part. 3 nights later, I woke up around 2 a.m. Vanessa wasn't in bed. The hallway lights downstairs were still on. I could hear her voice faintly from the kitchen. Soft. Laughing. I walked halfway down the stairs before stopping. She was on speakerphone. I know, she whispered. He still thinks this marriage is about love. Silence. Then laughter again. A man's laughter this time. Oh, comfortable. Familiar. I stood completely still. The refrigerator light reflected faintly across the marble counters. Vanessa leaned against the island barefoot, twirling wine in her glass. Relaxed. Careless. He'll sign it, she said. Pause. He always wants to look calm. That sentence hit harder than I expected. Because she was right. I did always stay calm. But not for the reasons she thought. I learned emotional control from my father. He used to say, the angrier you get, the more information you give away. So I stayed quiet. Even then. Especially then. I walked back upstairs silently. And pretended to still be asleep when she returned. She slid into bed beside me carefully. Warm skin. Soft perfume. The same woman who kissed me goodbye every morning. The same woman quietly preparing to weaponize our marriage. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, she kissed my cheek while adjusting her earrings. You okay? She asked. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And realized something terrifying. She wasn't nervous. Because guilty people fear being caught. Vanessa feared being underestimated. That's different. Much more dangerous. I'm fine, I said. Then she smiled. Again. God. That smile still bothers me. The following week I contacted my attorney. His name was Richard Levin. 72 years old. Quiet. Precise. The kind of man who looked permanently unimpressed by human behavior. He read the prenup silently in his office while rain tapped against the windows behind him. Then he removed his glasses slowly. "How long have you been financing her company?" he asked. "For years." "Through direct investment?" "Mostly private holding transfers." He stared at me for a moment, then leaned back. "Does she know who actually owns the commercial property her business operates in?" I looked at him carefully. "No." Richard nodded once. "Interesting. Very interesting. Because Vanessa thought her company's success was entirely hers. What she didn't know was that the building housing her flagship office belonged to a trust. A trust my father established years earlier. One I controlled after his death. I never told her because I never wanted money to define us. At least, that's what I believed back then." Richard tapped the prenup lightly. "She's structuring this like she expects future separation." I stayed quiet. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "Do you want to protect yourself? Pause. Or expose her?" That room suddenly felt colder. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. And for the first time, I stopped thinking like a husband. Months passed. The wedding planning continued. Vanessa became increasingly controlling. Not openly, subtly. Little comments. Little humiliations. The kind designed to weaken confidence slowly over time. At dinner parties, she joked about my safe little investments. With friends, she'd laugh about how I lacked killer instinct. She loved that phrase. Killer instinct. Meanwhile, most of my income came through private equity structures she barely understood. I never corrected her assumptions. That became important later. One evening, I overheard her talking to her friend Camille in our living room. They didn't realize I'd come home early. "I just need the marriage stable for a few years," Vanessa said casually. "And then?" Vanessa laughed softly. "Then I upgrade." Upgrade. I remember standing there in silence. One hand still on the front door. Feeling something inside me go completely numb. Not anger. Worse. Clarity. The strange thing about betrayal is that eventually it becomes too obvious to ignore. And once that happens, love dies very quietly. After that night, I stopped confronting reality emotionally. I started documenting it. Conversations. Financial behavior. Hidden transfers. Phone records. Richard arranged private forensic reviews through one of his investigators. What we discovered was worse than infidelity. Vanessa had been moving money slowly through shell consultations tied to a man named Derek Mercer. The same man from the late-night phone call. Derek wasn't just an affair. He was planning expansion deals with her using assets she believed she'd eventually secure through divorce leverage. My assets. Our wedding was 8 weeks away. And somehow, she was already planning the life after me. That realization changed everything. I still remember the exact moment revenge became inevitable. It happened in our kitchen. Rain outside again. Funny how the worst memories always involve rain. Vanessa stood across from me drinking tea while scrolling through luxury venues on her tablet. Without looking up, she said, "You know what your problem is?" I stayed quiet. "You're too passive." Pause. "You let people think you matter more than you actually do." That sentence hung in the air between us. Cold. Sure. Precise. She finally looked up. And smiled. Again. At least, that's what she thought was happening. 3 weeks before the wedding, Richard finalized everything. New trust protections. Asset isolation. Property enforcement triggers. Commercial lease reversals. Corporate exposure packets. I remember sitting in his office late at night while city lights flickered through the windows. "You understand," he said carefully, "once this starts, there's no reversing it." I nodded. Because by then, the marriage already felt dead. I just hadn't buried it yet. The wedding itself was beautiful. That's the disturbing part. Most emotional disasters are. Vanessa walked down the aisle in a custom silk gown worth more than my first car. Yes, cried. String quartet. Luxury estate. Perfect photography. Everyone saw romance. I saw performance. During the vows, she squeezed my hands gently while promising loyalty. And for one dangerous second, I almost believed her again. That terrified me. Because manipulation works best when part of you still wants the lie. The reception lasted until midnight. At one point, I found Derek standing near the outdoor bar, watching Vanessa dance. He looked uncomfortable when he realized I recognized him. Interesting. Very interesting. I walked over calmly. Enjoying the wedding? I asked. His throat moved slightly before he answered. Yeah. Pause. She seems happy. I nodded slowly. She usually does when she thinks she's winning. His expression changed immediately. That was the first time fear entered the story. Real fear. 6 months into the marriage, Vanessa changed completely. Actually, no, that's not true. She stopped pretending. There's a difference. The warmth disappeared first. Then the respect. Then intimacy became transactional. Conversations felt strategic. Everything became about positioning. Power. Leverage. Image. At night, she stayed awake scrolling through luxury homes she wanted. Eventually, she started mentioning divorce statistics casually, like someone studying weather forecasts. One night she said, "You know, most wealthy men hide money from their wives." I looked away from the television slowly. Do they? She nodded. I think it says a lot about trust. That almost made me laugh. But I stayed calm. Always calm. The next major reveal happened 8 months into the marriage. Richard called me directly. You need to come in. His voice sounded different. Tighter. When I arrived, he slid photographs across the desk. Hotel meetings. Financial transfers. Documents. Derek and Vanessa had already drafted future partnership agreements assuming post-divorce liquidity. She wasn't just cheating emotionally. She was building a financial future around my destruction. I stared at the photos silently. Richard studied me carefully. You all right? No, I admitted quietly. That was the first honest answer I'd given anyone in months. The worst photograph showed them sitting together reviewing architectural plans. Smiling. Relaxed. Planning. Like I was already gone. I remember driving home slowly that night. Streetlights reflecting through the windshield. Hands gripping the wheel tighter than usual. And suddenly, I realized something horrifying. Vanessa never loved stability. She loved acquisition. People. Status. Resources. Attention. Everything was transactional to her. Including me. When I entered the house, she was sitting on the couch watching television. Bare feet tucked under a blanket. Soft lighting. Domestic peace. Fake peace. She looked up immediately. You're late. I nodded once. Work. She muted the television. Then narrowed her eyes slightly. Why do you seem different lately? Pause. You're quieter. I almost smiled. Because she finally sensed it. The shift. Predators become nervous when prey stops reacting normally. I've just been thinking, I said. About what? I looked directly at her. Consequences. That made her uncomfortable. Only for a second. But I saw it. And once you see fear in someone manipulative, you never forget it. The actual collapse started 4 months later. Vanessa filed first. Exactly as Richard predicted. Emotional cruelty claims. Financial incompatibility. Strategic language. Everything carefully constructed to damage perception before facts emerged. But she made one mistake. She assumed I would panic publicly. Instead, I disappeared emotionally. No interviews. No social media war. No screaming. No begging. Nothing. That silence destroyed her expectations. Then discovery began. And everything changed. The courtroom smelled faintly like old paper and polished wood. Vanessa sat across from me wearing soft neutral colors designed to appear sympathetic. Derek sat behind her. Big mistake. Richard noticed him immediately. The proceedings started normally. Then Richard stood. Come. Slow. Dangerous. I'd like clarification, he said, regarding Mrs. Hale's claims of independent business growth. Vanessa's attorney objected immediately. Denied. Richard continued. Then he introduced the commercial ownership records. The room shifted instantly. Vanessa's expression changed first. Confusion. Then concern. Then something much worse. Richard walked slowly toward the evidence screen. The primary office location used by Mrs. Hale's company, he explained calmly, has always operated under trust-controlled property ownership. Pause. Controlled entirely by my client. Silence. Absolute silence. Vanessa turned toward me slowly. Actually turned. Like she genuinely couldn't process what she'd heard. That was the moment she realized she never truly understood who I was. But Richard wasn't finished. Next came the financial tracing. Shell consultations. Transfer chains. hidden planning documents, future liquidation projections tied to anticipated divorce outcomes. Even Derek looked pale. Vanessa tried interrupting twice. Richard ignored her both times. Then came the final blow. The post-nuptial enforcement packet. While Vanessa obsessed over protecting herself through the prenup, Richard quietly inserted fraud trigger clauses during later restructuring agreements she signed without reading carefully. Those clauses mattered now, because financial concealment voided her protections entirely. And she'd concealed plenty. The judge removed his glasses slowly. That's never a good sign. Vanessa looked at me desperately for the first time in years. Not lovingly. Not emotionally. Strategically. Like she still believed she could manipulate me if she found the right expression. Then she whispered something. So quietly only I heard it. You planned this. I looked at her for a long moment, then answered honestly. No, boss. You did. That destroyed her more than the verdict itself. Because deep down, manipulative people eventually realize something horrifying. Their victims learned from them. The settlement collapsed her company within 11 months. Most investors vanished after the exposure. Derek disappeared first. Of course he did. Men like him always do. Vanessa tried rebuilding publicly. But reputation damage spreads quietly in high-end business circles. Especially when greed becomes visible. The last time I saw her was almost 2 years later. Rain again. Strange. She stood outside a hotel downtown wearing a dark coat. Older somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. Like life finally stopped cooperating with her self-image. She noticed me immediately. For a moment neither of us spoke. Traffic moved behind us. Cold wind. Distant sirens. Then she asked, "Did you ever love me?" I thought about that carefully. Longer than she expected. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Boss, I think that's why this took so long." Her eyes watered slightly. Real emotion this time. Not performance. Not strategy. Just regret. And somehow, that was sadder than all the betrayal. Because by then revenge didn't feel satisfying anymore. Only necessary. She nodded once. Then asked the question that truly mattered. "When did you stop loving me?" I looked past her toward the rain-covered streetlights. And remembered the prenup sliding across the candlelit table. That smile. That terrible smile. Then I answered. "The moment you started treating love like a negotiation." She looked down immediately. No defense. No manipulation. Nothing left to sell. I walked away before she could say anything else. And for the first time in years, I felt calm again. Real calm. Not survival. Not performance. Because some betrayals don't destroy you. They introduce you to the version of yourself that finally stops ignoring the truth. And that was the night I realized something important. She thought the prenup protected her from losing money. But what she really lost was the only person who ever loved her before seeing exactly who she was. And once that happened, there was nothing left to negotiate.